Welcome to one of our Alfa Laval 360-degree service and maintenance videos. With Alfa Laval Service, you maximize the reliability and uptime of your equipment. In this video, we will focus on how to conduct service and maintenance on the standard Alfa Laval Twin Screw pump using our service kit with genuine Alfa Laval spare parts. How to reverse the direction of flow and set timing. First, remove the gearbox top cover. Ensure that there is no oil in the gearbox. If necessary, remove the drain plug and drain. Now remove the bolts and washers from the gearbox end cover. Then remove the end cover, including the shafts, and fix it in a vise. Now remove the bolts from the bearing retainer. Remove the shafts from the gearbox end cover. Fix the shafts in a vise. Remove the bearing nuts. Remove the bolts from the timing gear clamp plate. Move the drive shaft to a hydraulic press and remove the gear and bearings from the drive shaft. Then press the gear and the bearings out of the auxiliary shaft using the hydraulic press. Reverse the middle bearings of the bearing assembly for the auxiliary shaft. First, place the timing gear clamp plate on the auxiliary shaft. Heat up the gear sleeve. Place the gear sleeve on the auxiliary shaft. You may need a mallet to ensure that the gear sleeve is in place. Now place the gear on the timing gear sleeve. Place the bearing retainer plate on the auxiliary shaft. Heat up the bearings and place them on the shaft. You may need a mallet to ensure that the bearings are properly fitted. They are fitted when there is metal-to-metal contact. Now place the tab washer and the bearing nut on the shaft and tighten the bearing nut. Lock the bearing nut. Now reverse the middle bearing of the bearing assembly for the drive shaft. Heat up the gear and place the gear on the shaft. You may need to tap the gear into place using a mallet. The gear is in place when there is metal-to-metal contact. Place the bearing retainer on the gear. Heat up the bearings and place them on the shaft. You may need a mallet to ensure that the bearings are properly fitted. They are fitted when there is metal-to-metal contact. Next, place the tab washer and the bearing nut on the drive shaft and tighten the bearing nut. Lock the bearing nut. Now place the two shafts in the gearbox end cover. Apply a locking compound to all the bolts and tighten the bearing retainer bolts. Place the bolts in the timing gear clamp plate. Remove the front lip seals. Lubricate and replace the front lip seals. Lubricate the gearbox end cover O-ring and insert it into the gearbox. Fit the gearbox end cover, including shafts, into the gearbox. Position the gearbox and bolts, then tighten. Make sure the gear rotates on the sleeve. Remount the seal housing and tighten the cap screws. Lubricate and replace the pump casing elastomer. Mount the cartridge seal onto the shafts. Notice the indication marks. Replace the O-rings on the retainer plugs. Remount the retainer plugs and gland guards. Now ensure that the indication marks on the screws correspond with the markings on the shafts. Then place the feed screws onto a flat surface and mesh them so that the ends are flush. Then fit both screws onto the shafts at the same time and push them until they come into contact with the mechanical seal sleeve. To make the splines fit, you may need to rotate the shafts until they match. Then lubricate the elastomers and fit them onto the feed screw nuts and lubricate. Now apply a locking compound to the feed screw nut thread. Mount the feed screw nuts and tighten. Insert a soft material block between the feed screws to stop them from turning. Tighten the feed screw nuts to the required torque as stated in the instruction manual. Turn the drive shaft and check the clearance between the feed screw flanks. Use feeler gauges to make sure the feeler is evenly divided between the flanks. Refer to the pump head clearance information in the instruction manual. Tighten the gear sleeve bolts in a cross pattern. Recheck the timing and ensure it falls within specifications. Lubricate and replace the gearbox top cover O-ring. Now mount the gearbox top cover. If you drained the gearbox before the maintenance, refill with oil. Fit the pump casing to the new bearing configuration. The pump casing needs to be rotated 180 degrees from its original position. Lubricate and replace the front cover elastomer and fit the front cover to the pump casing. Fit the front cover nuts and washers and tighten to the recommended torque value as stated in the instruction manual. Finally, rotate the drive shaft clockwise to check for jamming. To maintain the Alfa Laval twin screw pump as shown, these tools are required. Always remember to read the instruction manual thoroughly to make sure that you cover all the maintenance steps. This video only shows you some of the steps. When servicing Alfa Laval equipment, Always wear appropriate personal protective equipment. Thank you for watching.